Hello and welcome back once again to the Ultimate March Madness Tournament. My name is Natty Cash, and if you haven't seen the first part of this series, please make sure you go in the description below, find the link to part 1, and you can meet us back up to this point because we have a few spoilers that we're going to talk about today as we get into the next region, which today's region is going to be the Florida region. So as you can see, thus far we have completed 2 different regions, and yet we have not seen a number 1 seed move forward. We have SMU and Boston College that have come out of the first 2 regions. Next up, we are then going and looking at the Florida region to see which team is going to come out of that region. Let's take a look. So first up, we'll see in the Florida region, we've got the Alabama Crimson Tide, a 13-5 SEC record. They were 3rd in their league, but they lost out early to Florida in their conference tournament. Let's see what they can do, ranked as a number 1 seed in this tournament. Next up, we have a play-in game between Central Michigan and Central Connecticut Blue Devils. We've got the Chippewas from Central Michigan, MAC team that was 4th in their league, versus Central Connecticut, who's the top team in the Northeast Conference. However, lost out in the conference tournament, so they did not move on to the normal March Madness. But could be a good matchup to see who comes out on top. Then we move on to the 8-9 matchup. First, our number 9 team is Tulane, the Green Wave, coming out of the American Conference. Had a so-so year, 10th in their league. We're going to see what they can do in this tournament. And they're going to go up against UC San Diego, the Tritons out of the Big West, 2nd in their league. Unfortunately, because they're new to Division I, they are ineligible for their conference tournament. So there's a lot of upside on this UC San Diego team and see what they can do in a tournament format. Next, number 5, we've got the Richmond Spiders coming out of the Atlantic 10. 1st in their league, and unfortunately lost out early in the conference tournament, but they've got a chance now to then run wild on this tournament this year. Then they are waiting on a play-in game that is going to feature Southern Indiana and UTEP. Southern Indiana is coming out of the Ohio Valley region, 8th in their league. We'll see what they can do to maybe throw an upset up against the UTEP Miners coming out of the Conference USA, 5th in that league, but did well to get all the way to the conference finals this year for Conference USA, losing out to Western Kentucky. Now, the 13 matchup is another play-in game. We see Northern Arizona out of the Big Sky region coming out in there. Not too bad in that region, but lost out early in their conference tournament versus the California Baptist Lancers, team out of the WAC conference. Again, middling record 16-17. We'll see who comes out on top in that matchup up against number 4, McNeese, the Cowboys. Good 30-4 record, 17-1 in their conference, league champions. We'll see what they can do. They've got a really good record, but will that hold up against tough competition as the tournament unfolds? We'll see. Now we move on to the bottom of the bracket here, and the first team we have is the Villanova Wildcats, an 18-16 record, 6th in the Big East. We'll see what they can do, being a high-ranked team in this tournament. They're waiting on a 14-seed play-in, which is going to be between the Alcorn State Braves coming out of the SWAC Conference, 2nd in the SWAC Conference, up against Louisville Cardinals. Could be a sleeper team, although didn't do well this year. 8-24 record, 15th in the ACC. We'll see if they can then bring up some of their classic efforts from previous tournaments of old. Then next we have in the 11 spot, we've got a play-in game between Central Arkansas, an Atlantic Sun team, up against Long Beach State. Beach State are league champions coming out of the Big West. We'll be interested to see what they can do, and maybe if Central Arkansas can pull an upset there. And they will play, the winner will end up playing the USC Trojans, 15-18 record team, 9th in the Pac-12. We'll see what they can do in that 6th seed. Will they be able to move on from there? We'll have to wait and see. The 7th seed is the UAB Blazers, 12-6 record in the American Conference, 4th in the league. And they went all the way to the finals, semifinals, and lost out to Temple in their conference tournament. They have to wait for a play-in game between the Coppin State Eagles, coming out of the MEAC region, and the Sam Houston State Bearcats. The Sam Houston State Bearcats were first in the Conference USA, but were not able to get out of their conference tournament. And Coppin State, it would be a really big upset if they could come out of this game. They had a 2-27 record throughout the year. And our final matchups here, we have a play-in game at the 15th seed between the Southern Illinois University Edwardsville Cougars. That's a mouthful. 17-16 record coming out of the Ohio Valley Conference. And they are up against Fresno State. The Bulldogs, towards the bottom of the Mountain West Conference, 9th in their league. We'll see who comes out from that matchup, but whoever wins will then go and face the Michigan State Spartans, a 20-15 record, 8th in the Big Ten, but we know what their pedigree can be in these conference tournaments. And that is our bracket. So let's, again, just take a look at the bracket in its entirety. Some interesting matchups that might come together here. But again, we're going to go through one at a time, starting with our play-in games. First up, we have our 16 seed play-in, which is going to be the Central Michigan Chippewas versus the Central Connecticut Blue Devils. And we see that Central Michigan has run away with it. It was a close game in the first half, but Central Michigan took off in the second half to get the decisive victory. And so Central Michigan moves on to the next round. And so we see that Central Michigan is now set up to play Alabama in the next round. Our next play-in is Southern Indiana versus the UTEP Miners. And it is the Screaming Eagles out of Southern Indiana that get the win here. Again, a back-and-forth game, many lead changes, but it is Southern Indiana that take the lead towards the end and never relinquish it, leading to their playoff win. Great job for the Screaming Eagles. And we see that Southern Indiana will move on to play Richmond in the next round. Next up, we have Northern Arizona against California Baptist. And it is the Lumberjacks from Northern Arizona that get the victory. They were leading for the entire game, but it was pretty close all the way through. California Baptist pushed them throughout the entire game, but it is the Lumberjacks that move on to the next round. And as we see, Northern Arizona will move on to play the Cowboys from McNeese. Next up in the play-in round, we see Alcorn State lining up against Louisville. And as we see, it is Louisville that get the victory here. Alcorn State was leading the entire first half, but it was Louisville that went on a run and was able to maintain that all the way to an 8-point victory. So as we can see, the Cardinals out of Louisville are going to play the Villanova Wildcats in the next round. Our next play-in match is the Central Arkansas Bears up against Long Beach State. And it is Long Beach State that get the victory. They started to pull away as the second half presumed and never lost their lead throughout the game. It is the Big West champions that are going to move on to the next round. Which this means that Long Beach State are awaiting to play USC in the next round. Another play-in matchup is going to be between Coppin State and Sam Houston State. And as we can see, Sam Houston State has the decisive victory where they had been dominant throughout the matchup, and it is Sam Houston that move on to the next round. And we see Sam Houston State moves on to play UAB in the next round. Our final play-in matchup is between SIU Edwardsville and the Fresno State Bulldogs. And it is the SIU Edwardsville Cougars that get the victory. They take the lead early in the first half and can keep that lead throughout the entire game. 6-point victories for them to move on to the next round. And with that, our 16 teams are set and ready to go. And again, we'll start at the top. We're going to look at what the result's going to be between Alabama and Central Michigan. And a very close game between a 1 seed and a 16 seed, but it is Alabama that pull the victory out of here. They are leading the entire time, but Central Michigan did not go away and had a late push at the end to try to take the victory, but Alabama held on to move on to the quarterfinals of this region. And next up, we have the Tulane Green Wave up against the UC San Diego Tritons to see who will move on to play Alabama. And it is the Tritons from UC San Diego that get the victory. They were holding on to that lead throughout the first half, but Tulane really pushed in the second half, but did not have enough in the end, could not put some final scoring in, and San Diego got the victory here. The Tritons are moving on. So we have one quarterfinal set. The second quarterfinal we're going to see is next game will be Richmond versus the Southern Indiana Screaming Eagles. And Richmond come out flying as they dominate in this game, creating a massive lead and continuing on to a dominant victory, and Richmond's moving on. Next up, we are going to have Northern Arizona going up against the McNeese Cowboys. And it is McNeese State that get the victory here. A close game throughout, as there is many lead changes between the two, but McNeese State went on a run and were able to get the victory in the end. So with the first two quarterfinals set, we'll move on to the bottom of the bracket where we have the Villanova Wildcats versus the Louisville Cardinals. And we do see Villanova getting the dominant win over Louisville here. Again, they did not relinquish their lead at all and cruised to an easy win in the end. Moving on to the next round. Next up, we're going to see what Long Beach State is going to be able to do against USC in this next matchup. And it is Long Beach State with the upset over the USC Trojans to get the victory. A back-and-forth game until Long Beach State goes on an offensive run and never looks back, creating the upset win and moving on to the next round. And now we have had the first true upset of this region. Let's see what else we get moving forward, as we're going to see UAB facing off against Sam Houston State. And it is the UAB Blazers that get the victory. A close game throughout the first half, but UAB were able to find something in the second half to create a fairly easy win in the end to move on to the next round. And finally, to wrap up the first round, we're going to have SIU Edwardsville going up against the Michigan State Spartans. And we see a pretty solid win for Michigan State, leading for most of the way and never looking back, going on to a dominant win and moving on to the next round. So we see here the matchups for the quarterfinals in the Florida region. We'll see as we go through who will make it on to the semifinals. As we look at the top, we will first see the result for Alabama and UC San Diego. And look at this matchup. Wow. Right down to the wire. We see a few lead changes. Alabama was leading a good part of the first and into the second. Then UC San Diego was leading in the second half. Back and forth, and finally a last-ditch effort from Alabama to get a 1-point lead to move on to the next round. Wow, what a matchup we saw here. So with Alabama moving on to the semifinal in this region, who will join them? Will it be the Richmond Spiders or the McNeese State Cowboys? And it is Richmond that get the victory here. They were dominant and led most of the way. Even though McNeese State tried to push towards halftime to get close, Richmond found another gear and were able to move on and get a dominant victory to move to the semifinals. Now we look to the bottom of this bracket where we see Villanova here to play against Long Beach State. Let's see who moves on from this matchup. And it is the Villanova Wildcats that end the run for Long Beach State. They led and took a commanding lead early and never looked back, moving on to the semifinals in the Florida region. And with that, we have one more quarterfinal matchup to go, where it is the Blazers from UAB facing the Michigan State Spartans. And in another very tight matchup, we do have the Spartans getting the victory in the end. They had a decent lead throughout the first half, but UAB fought back well to then give it a nice battle in the second half, but it wasn't enough as Michigan State get the 3-point victory and move on to the next round. Now just 4 teams left in this region, down into the semifinals of the Florida region. We have any of these teams that could come out of this bracket, starting with Alabama versus Richmond. And it is the Crimson Tide from Alabama that get the victory. They took an early lead and kept that lead throughout, even then making that lead bigger all the way to the regional finals. So again, a good game, good run for Richmond, but it is Alabama that is moving on. And in the other semifinal, we have a good matchup with Michigan State and Villanova going up against each other. And it is Villanova that gets the victory here. Villanova takes the lead middle of the way through the first half and maintains that lead all the way through to a 8-point victory, moving on to the regional finals. Now here we are down to the Florida Region Finals, where we have the number 1 ranked Alabama Crimson Tide going up against the number 3 ranked in this region, the Villanova Wildcats. Let's see who will move on from this region. And it was a tight game throughout, but it was Alabama that wins and moves on to the last 16 teams. A tight game throughout, but once Alabama took a lead going into the second half, they maintained that lead, even though slight, all the way through, and Villanova did not have an opportunity to close that gap any further, leaving Alabama Crimson Tide as the champions coming out of the Florida region. And now we have our first number 1 seed coming in to represent the final 16 teams. The Alabama Crimson Tide got out of their region. There were some tight matchups there, but they are the champions out of the Florida region. Thank you so much for watching. Our next video, we will then run through the Southeast region to see which team will come out of that region. But for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Bye for now.